She called it restructuring for the future. 12 years ago, none of that mattered. We were in a leaky warehouse, 3 desks for 5 people, vending machine coffee, buzzing fluorescents, and a bathroom door that never latched. But I had something real, a concept that could revolutionize supply chain logistics. I still remember the smell, rust, burnt wiring, and raw ambition. My first working model was cobbled together from liquidation sale parts and a welding torch I barely knew how to use. It sparked, it hummed, it worked. That became patent number 1, then 2, then 5. By year 7, I'd filed 23, all under Coherent Solutions, all listing me, Nicholas Crane, as original inventor. That detail would become everything. Eventually, they gave me a title, Senior Innovation Director. No corner office, no team, just a laminated badge and enough autonomy to keep building what made the company viable. My systems generated real revenue. Licensing started. Small, Ohio, Texas. Then Fortune 500s and government contractors came knocking. By year 9, we were in a downtown tower with an espresso bar that cost more than my first apartment. 200 employees, most of whom never saw the warehouse days. I stayed focused. Give me a lab, a budget, and space to work. And I delivered. Patent 14 cut transport costs by 22%. Patent 19 redefined warehouse automation. Patent 23, the masterpiece, was a predictive routing algorithm that rerouted shipments in real time without downtime. It brought in $340 million in 18 months. Trade journals called it transformative. I called it Wednesday. I wasn't flashy. No social media, no self-promotion. Some weeks I wore the same shirt for 3 days. But I was the foundation, evident in how people acted during crises, how legal triple-checked my filings, how acquisition offers always included clauses protecting my work. Because here's what business schools don't teach. Without real innovation, you're just burning investor cash. I kept the lights on. They built an empire on my patents, and I never missed a filing deadline. Everything I built was documented, defensible, and built to last. If this is your first time here, hit subscribe so you never miss another powerful story. And let me know your thoughts on today's one in the comments. I read every message. I should have seen the warning signs. Aggressive scaling, new logo, new C-suite, familiar faces vanishing, longer board meetings, slower legal reviews. In the chaos, people forget, or pretend to forget, who built the engine. Back then, I felt pride. Pride that something I'd welded in a freezing warehouse now employed people and mattered. I never wanted to own the company. Just build meaningful things in peace. That mindset was my first catastrophic error. I knew things had changed the moment Amara Hayes walked in, hair pulled back like armor, heels clicking like a countdown. Everyone stood. Didn't. I was troubleshooting a servo calibration, actual work. She smiled. Nicholas, right? I've heard incredible things. As if 12 years of innovation could be reduced to things. She was a strategic hire, brought in to optimize innovation pipelines. Translation: make it cheaper and shinier for resale. Her resume glittered with buzzwords, but zero experience building real tech. She came from venture capital. She knew how to sell companies, not build them. I gave her a chance. First week, she asked if we could gamify the patent process. I laughed. She wasn't joking. By week 2, unscheduled meetings flooded my calendar. Synergy workshops, roadmap alignments. When I asked for clarity, I got, "We'll catch you up later, Nicholas." Later never came. Then my budget was slashed by 60%, labeled resource reallocation toward market-facing initiatives. My supervisor, suddenly vague on the org chart, admitted it came from Amara. When I asked if anyone told her we needed that budget for prototype validation, she stared into her tea like it held answers. Within a month, 2 of my engineers were reassigned to an innovation accelerator run by some newcomer who said, "Fail fast," like it meant something. No warning. I walked into the lab to find their stations stripped, their names erased from the board. That's when I started documenting everything, quietly, meticulously, every canceled meeting, every unauthorized asset transfer. I wasn't angry yet, just alert. Like the air before a storm, you can taste the ozone. Then came the quarterly presentation. I'd submitted a comprehensive progress report on patent number 32, a load optimization system that could reduce fuel consumption by 14% across entire fleets. Instead of using my technical breakdown, Amara loaded some glossy slideshow filled with stock images and vague corporate speak. My patent was rebranded as Next Gen Logistics Enhancement Suite, with a full-page photo of Amara on the title slide like she'd conceived it during a yoga retreat. I sat in the back, fingers tight around a coffee cup that had gone cold an hour earlier. Didn't interrupt. Just watched her perform for the board, repackaging my work into something marketable while erasing my name from the narrative. The worst part wasn't the theft of credit, it was how easily the board accepted it. They didn't care who engineered the solution, just that the product kept moving and the metrics looked appealing. Some people noticed. A few whispered apologies in hallways. One of my former engineers left a note on my desk. "This company doesn't deserve you." I folded it carefully and kept it. By month 4, I was barely included in my own demonstrations. I'd pass glass-walled conference rooms and see Amara pitching my technology to investors, laughing like this was all entertainment. To her, maybe it was. But to me, Coherent Solutions wasn't a stepping stone. It was the forge where I'd poured 12 years of sleepless nights, failed prototypes and breakthroughs that kept hundreds of people employed. And now I was being systematically erased one decision at a time. I could have fought openly, demanded respect, made noise. But I didn't. Not yet. Because Amara thought she was winning, and I needed her to keep believing that. Let her assume I was just some burned-out engineer too exhausted to resist. Let her think I'd fade quietly into irrelevance. She was building her narrative. I was sharpening my blade. She waited until the full board meeting to execute it. Calculated. Public. Amara didn't just want me gone. She wanted a performance. The conference room was staged like a courtroom. Polished mahogany table, designer water bottles positioned just so. Everyone had embossed name cards like we were hosting a summit. The board sat scattered across their ergonomic chairs, half on tablets, the rest pretending not to check stock tickers. Amara stood at the head like a prosecutor preparing closing arguments, wearing a smile that never reached her eyes. "Before we discuss Q4 projections," she began, flipping through a folder with theatrical precision, "there's some legacy housekeeping we need to address." She reached beneath the table and produced my original contract. My contract. Signed back when we had no legal department and used a template downloaded from a small business website. I recognized the crease in the corner where I'd folded it into my backpack 12 years ago. My signature was still slightly smudged from signing it during a caffeine crash. That paper had been scanned and backed up across multiple systems. Seeing it in her hands made my jaw clench involuntarily. "This represents what loyalty used to mean," Amara announced, holding the contract up like evidence. "But we're not that company anymore." Then she fed it into a paper shredder. Not symbolically, literally. An industrial shredder sat plugged into the wall behind her, and she fed my contract through inch by inch, maintaining direct eye contact the entire time. Every few seconds she'd pause, tilt her head like a bird studying a worm, then continue. "You've had a good run, Nicholas," she said, voice dripping with false sympathy. "But innovation requires fresh perspectives, new energy, people who understand velocity, not nostalgia." The blade chewed through the paper. The room filled with nothing but the mechanical grinding and my heartbeat pounding double time. "We appreciate your legacy contributions," she continued, adding air quotes around the word legacy like she was eulogizing a fax machine. "But moving forward, your services are no longer required." There it was. Fired. No HR representative clutching severance paperwork, no private office conversation with prepared talking points, just execution by shredder, delivered with a smile in a glass tomb filled with silent witnesses. The board didn't applaud, but a few chuckled. Applaud. Nervously. Uncertain if this was bold leadership or just cruelty. One member, someone I'd collaborated with during a brutal compliance audit years ago, glanced at me briefly, then immediately looked away like eye contact might implicate him. I didn't react, didn't speak. Just nodded once, slow and deliberate, like a doctor noting time of death. The humiliation hung thick in that room, but it didn't penetrate, because what Amara didn't know, what none of them realized, was that the paper she'd just destroyed was a historical artifact, a prop. The real contract, the one with the clause, existed elsewhere, protected, immutable, and buried on page 9, subsection D, under intellectual property rights and breach conditions, was the key to every single one of my 32 patents. I stood slowly, adjusted my collar like I wasn't calculating 17 different legal maneuvers, and said the only words I spoke that day. Noted. Then I walked out. No shouting, no threats, just one final glance at the shredder, still humming quietly behind Amara like it hadn't just committed the biggest mistake of her career. She thought I'd leave broken, defeated, maybe beg for a severance package. What she didn't understand was that I didn't need the paper anymore. I had the code. And now the clock had started. It began in year 4, back when Coherent Solutions was still too small to afford competent legal counsel and too arrogant to admit it. We'd just landed our first significant contract, a mid-sized freight company wanting to license my third patent for route optimization. Nothing revolutionary, but it came with requirements: proof of clear ownership, clean documentation, no ambiguities. That forced us to examine the foundation. What we found was concerning. The original IP clauses were dangerously vague, language broad enough to drive a lawsuit through sideways. That's when I understood I needed protection independent of the company. I hired my own attorney, paid out of pocket. His name was Lyle Bennett, and he looked like a retired accountant who'd wandered into law school by accident. Thin glasses, perpetually wrinkled shirts, always smelled like peppermint gum and printer toner. But Lyle was surgical. We met weekly at a diner 3 blocks from the warehouse, always the same booth, always ordered the same burnt hash browns and black coffee while we dissected every clause like it might explode. Eventually, we rewrote my contract, line by line, word by word. One clause buried toward the back, labeled IP reversion upon breach, became the weapon I'd spend the next 8 years quietly sharpening. Lyle explained it simply. If they terminate you properly, they keep everything. But if they breach the contract, any provision, any term, all patents credited to you revert entirely. Full rights, no financial obligation. We didn't just draft it, we filed it through a third-party digital notary service, one of the early blockchain timestamp systems. Immutable, uneditable, geo-locked. That contract lived on 4 servers across 2 continents, plus 1 offline backup drive in Lyle's fireproof safe. We never discussed it again after signing. Didn't need to. It was insurance. Silent and heavy, invisible until someone totaled the car. Over the years, Coherent Solutions grew and shifted. New contracts, new lawyers, new leadership bringing new employee agreements and digital onboarding systems that buried terms under 18 screens of click to accept. But I never clicked, never signed. My original contract remained untouched, and legal always backed down. They understood better than to poke that particular hornet's nest. Even when the acquisition happened and Amara started tightening control, I stayed quiet. Just watched her dance through her power plays, imagining herself a visionary while I sat 3 moves ahead, holding a clause that could dismantle everything she thought she controlled. Because here's what they don't teach in MBA. Programs. Contracts aren't just documents, they're leverage. And mine was a scalpel made of pure, patient vengeance. Every patent I filed, the routing algorithms, the automation modules, the predictive analytics platforms, they were all registered with me as original inventor. The company held rights under license, conditional license, that condition being no breach of contract. And Amara, with her expensive suits and her theatrical confidence, had just publicly shredded the only physical copy of my contract while announcing my termination without due process, without proper notice, without following the termination procedures outlined in Section 6. Breach, documented, witnessed by 14 people. I called Lyle that evening, told him what happened. He didn't respond immediately, just sipped something, probably tea knowing him, then chuckled, dry and low like a man watching dominoes wobble before the cascade. "All right, Nicholas," he said quietly, "let's open the vault." Next morning, he filed the breach notice with certified timestamp. Attached the original digitally signed contract, the notarized reversion clause, and a compliance audit showing exactly how they'd violated terms. We didn't send it to Amara first. We sent it to legal, their internal team, just to watch the panic bloom quietly before going external. Then, we copied their outside counsel, Highmark, Manhattan office, $1,500 per hour specialists who handle lawsuits large enough to crater stock prices. It took less than 20 hours for them to respond. Their tone wasn't aggressive, wasn't dismissive, it was nervous. They requested clarification, a meeting, time to review. Lyle replied with a PDF. Clean, simple. Paragraph 6, subsection D. In the event of termination deemed in breach of contract, all registered patents credited to the original inventor shall revert to said inventor with full rights of use, licensing, and transfer without financial obligation to the former employer. Underneath, blockchain signature, timestamp, geolocation data, biometric verification. The silence that followed wasn't accidental. It was stunned realization. They hadn't just fired me. They detonated the foundation of their entire intellectual property portfolio. And me. I didn't celebrate, didn't gloat, just went for a walk. The air tasted different that day, like rain on asphalt and overdue consequences finally arriving. They tried pretending it wasn't happening. 3 days after Lyle filed the breach notice, Coherent Solutions released a press statement. Corporate fluff about seamless leadership transitions and continued operational excellence. Not one word about patents, not one mention of breach, just carefully crafted optimism sprayed over a structure fire. I read it while stirring cream into my coffee. Vanilla, same as always. My phone buzzed. Lyle. They're stalling, hoping you'll negotiate first. I didn't negotiate. I waited. Inside Coherent Solutions, the chaos was already metastasizing. Production systems ran on software modules tied directly to my recent innovations. Process Algorithm 17, multi-node load balancing for automated warehouses, was locked behind an authorization key only I controlled. They'd never rotated it because nobody imagined I'd ever leave. They attempted a bypass. The patch failed catastrophically, triggering a safety shutdown. One entire facility went dark for 9 hours. 9 hours at $31,000 per hour in lost productivity. That got attention. Then, the licensing audits began. Our largest partner in Amsterdam flagged a clause requiring ongoing certification from the original patent holder, me, to maintain manufacturing compliance with technology derived from Patent 18. No certification, no compliance, no shipments. Their legal team sent an urgent request for confirmation. That email came directly to me, not to Coherent Solutions, not to legal. Me. I didn't respond. Not yet. Meanwhile, Amara continued her performance. All-hands meetings where she hyped new verticals and synergistic opportunities nobody understood. Internally, I heard whispers through back channels, engineers texting late at night. Is it true you're gone? They're saying everything's fine, but, always but. Legal attempted responding to our notice with evasive language. We dispute the interpretation of said clause. We believe termination was conducted within company policy. No mention of the shredder, no mention of the boardroom spectacle, just passive voice corporate speak designed to dodge accountability. Lyle sent a second message. This time we attached not just the original contract, but metadata from the blockchain notarization, a complete list of all 32 patents in question, and a footnote mentioning we'd already initiated preliminary discussions with 2 federal compliance auditors. That's when their emails stopped. Outwardly, they maintained the facade, but internally, you could feel the structure buckling. I could smell it, that nervous sweat that seeps into the seams of a failing operation, and like blood in water, it drew predators. First, a competing logistics firm I hadn't spoken to in 7 years invited me to coffee. Then, a private equity group called Lyle directly, asking whether the patents were currently encumbered. A tech startup, young, aggressive, well-funded, offered me a consulting position with 8 figures attached if I brought my work with me. Nobody was subtle anymore. The scent of weakness had gone airborne, and everyone wanted a piece. I let the calls accumulate, let the offers stack like poker chips while Coherent Solutions flailed behind closed doors. Every day they delayed responding strengthened my position. Every hour of downtime, every client inquiry about ownership widened the fracture in their foundation. They thought I'd come crawling back for a settlement. I was building leverage. One of their VPs finally called. Wanted to gain clarity on the nature of this dispute. I told him to direct all inquiries to Lyle, then asked how his daughter's soccer team was doing, just to remind him I still remembered the human beings behind the machinery. He sounded exhausted, genuinely exhausted. I almost felt sympathy. Almost. Because Coherent Solutions kept operating like they could pretend me out of existence, like they could fire the architect and still occupy the building without paying rent. What they hadn't realized yet was that the deed was in my name, and every step they took now was trespassing. It arrived in their inboxes at 9:03 a.m. on a Monday. That's when corporate arrogance peaks, right after the overpriced cold brew hits and before reality fully registers. Subject line: Notice of contractual breach and activation of patent reversion clause. Lyle's email was surgical, clean. A comprehensive PDF package including breach summary, notarized contract with blockchain, verification, clause-by-clause breakdown of the termination failure, and a final page listing all 32 patents with registration numbers, current licensing status, and estimated market valuations. It wasn't a letter. It was a legal guillotine. Amara's response came 41 minutes later. I'm not sure what fantasy you think this operates in, but Nicholas was an at-will employee terminated in accordance with HR procedures. We will not be intimidated by baseless claims. This matter is closed. I read it while finishing my second coffee. Smiled slightly. Lyle didn't respond to her directly. Instead, he blind copied their outside counsel. That changed everything. In-house lawyers are mostly defensive players. Their job is stalling, deflecting, running out clocks. But once outside counsel gets involved, especially from firms billing $2,000 per hour, the game shifts. They don't waste time because their clock is running, and they know exactly where the landmines are, buried. 5 hours later, we received a call from someone named Griffin Wells, senior partner at Highmark, the kind of firm that handles litigation large enough to move markets. His voice was controlled, clipped, and deeply irritated. I've reviewed the materials, he said carefully. The clause appears enforceable. Lyle didn't gloat, just said, yes, it does. Silence stretched between them. Then, this was not disclosed during due diligence. No. I imagine Amara in her corner office at that moment, probably leaning back in her imported leather chair, the one with heated massage settings because leadership is stressful. Probably laughing off the whole situation as overblown HR drama until Griffin forwarded her the clause. I know the exact moment it hit her, probably clicked the PDF with one perfectly manicured finger, scrolled through with mild annoyance until she reached paragraph 6, subsection D. In the event of termination deemed in breach of contract, all registered patents credited to the original inventor shall revert to said inventor with full rights of use, licensing, and transfer without financial obligation to the former employer. Not buried, not vague, just cold, clear law. We didn't hear from Amara directly after that. But suddenly, emails from legal took on a different tone. Fewer adjectives, more questions. They wanted to clarify intent, to schedule mutual resolution discussions, to explore ongoing ownership parameters. Too late. By week's end, Coherent Solutions issued a temporary operational pause on 4 production lines, all dependent on technology tied directly to my patents. The Amsterdam client suspended their Q4 order pending ownership clarification. Internal messages, leaked to me by sympathetic engineers, showed people panicking, asking why systems were suddenly inaccessible, why legal was locking down development environments, why compliance teams were auditing every patent deployment. One message simply asked, "Does this mean we don't actually own the tech?" Exactly. Amara attempted damage control during the next town hall. Certain former employees are making exaggerated claims, she said, voice cracking slightly on the word claims. We maintain full control of our intellectual property. Her voice broke halfway through, "Control." The Q&A session ended abruptly. One engineer I'd mentored for years messaged me afterward. "She's actually sweating, like visibly. It's beautiful." And through it all, I waited. Patient. Calm. Watching the quiet panic unfold from outside, like a man holding matches just far enough from gasoline to appreciate the smell. They thought this was over. I'd barely started. The first offer arrived via LinkedIn message, which would have been absurd if it hadn't included 7 zeros. Some recruiter from a West Coast research group pretending casualness. "Hey Nicholas, really impressed by your work on predictive routing. Ever considered joining a more agile environment?" Like I hadn't. Just legally detonated a billion-dollar company's IP foundation. 2 hours later, Lyle forwarded an email from a private equity firm in Chicago. No pleasantries, just a PDF titled "Preliminary Terms for Exclusive IP Acquisition" and a phone number starting with 312. The figure at the bottom, $18 million upfront. That was Monday. By Thursday, it became a feeding frenzy. Licensing firms, manufacturing corporations, 4 tech CEOs I'd never met who'd apparently been following my work for years. One even sent a gift basket containing whiskey older than my patents. I didn't drink it, not yet. Every day, Lyle and I met at the same diner where we'd originally drafted the contract. Same booth by the window, hash browns and black coffee. Except now the table was covered in term sheets, spreadsheets, and NDAs. I wasn't just some terminated engineer anymore. I was holding a weapon, and everyone wanted access. One offer came from a company that had tried acquiring Coherent Solutions 4 years ago. Amara had called them opportunists. Now they were back, grinning like cats with open checkbooks. They didn't want just licensing rights. They wanted everything. Full acquisition of all 32 patents, plus a 3-year exclusive consultancy, office in Portland, equity options, and a signing bonus that would buy a waterfront house twice over with enough remaining to build a private dock. I didn't accept immediately, because I wasn't rushing anymore. For 12 years, I'd worked inside a machine built on urgency. Ship the next prototype, hit the next milestone, optimize the next process, always chasing someone else's timeline. Now they were chasing mine. Lyle loved it, called it slow dancing with sharks. Every counteroffer we made came with longer silence on their end, then revised figures. One firm doubled their licensing rate overnight. Another threw in board positions and first refusal on any future patents I developed. I hadn't even agreed to anything yet. And I was already being treated like royalty. The emails from Coherent Solutions slowed to almost nothing. Griffin sent one terse update. "We continue reviewing relevant clauses and exploring resolution options." Translation: they were losing and everyone knew it. Amara. Radio silence. No apology, no back-channel appeal. Just expensive perfume fading into memory while her empire bled cash, trying to untangle itself from the trap she'd walked straight into. And the strange part, I wasn't even angry anymore. I felt clear. Focused. For the first time in years, I wasn't reacting. I was choosing. I wasn't patching holes in someone else's ship. I was charting my own course, and the tides were in my favor. At one point, Lyle slid a stack of offers across the table and said, "You know, if we play this correctly, you'd never work another day in your life." I laughed, not because he was wrong, but because I finally understood something fundamental. They didn't just fire me, they freed me. And now I was deciding who gets to pay for the privilege of using what I built. I didn't wear a suit. Figured if they were going to see the ghost of their mistakes, I might as well look like myself. Dark jeans, work boots, button-down that still smelled faintly of solder and coffee. I wasn't there to impress anyone. I was there to finish the hand I'd been quietly playing for 12 years. The only difference was the leather portfolio under my arm, containing 32 patents, 7 offers, and a licensing contract they'd either sign or regret forever. Either way, I'd already won. The receptionist froze when I walked through the entrance, eyes wide, mouth opening slightly like she wasn't sure whether to call security or apologize. I nodded politely and kept walking. No need to announce anything. Everyone would know soon enough. The boardroom felt smaller than I remembered. Corporate spaces tend to shrink once you stop needing their validation. Same walnut table, same glass walls, same leather. Chairs filled with mostly the same faces. Except this time, I didn't need any of them to approve of me. Amara was already there, arms folded, tie loosened, sleeves rolled up like she'd been fighting fires all morning. She looked like someone who hadn't slept properly in a week. For once, I believed it. "Nicholas," she said with a strained smile, "appreciate you coming. Let's clear this up, shall we?" I didn't sit. Just placed the portfolio on the table, opened it, and slid 2 documents forward. One labeled Patent Licensing Agreement, the other Statement of Intent to Transfer IP Portfolio. "2 options," I said calmly. "You license the technology at my rates under my terms, or I accept one of the half-dozen offers currently on the table. Some from your competitors, some from those opportunists you warned me about years ago." I let the last word hang. The room went still. One board member, a finance guy with a face like dried leather, leaned forward. "We'd need time to review." "You've had time," I interrupted gently. "You had time the day Amara shredded my contract like theater. You had time when your lawyers received the reversion notice. You had time every single day you delayed, hoping I'd blink first." I looked directly at Amara. "I don't blink." The CFO, someone I'd actually respected until she ghosted me during all this, cleared her throat. "What are we discussing financially?" I tapped the licensing agreement. $5 million upfront, annual license fee of 20% net profits derived from all products utilizing the patents. Term is 7 years, renewable. Any lapse in payment or attempt to reassign without written consent nullifies everything. Amara scoffed. "You're holding us hostage." "No," I said, smiling thinly. "You're leasing what you don't own. The alternative is explaining to shareholders why your core technology is now controlled by the man you publicly humiliated." Her face went pale. I watched it happen in real time, jaw tightening, eyes scanning for allies who weren't there anymore. Even the board members who'd chuckled during my execution were now staring at the documents like they might ignite. One whispered something to another. I didn't catch it, didn't need to. This wasn't negotiation. This was reckoning. "You built this company on my work," I continued quietly, "and you thought cutting me loose meant cutting costs. But now you either pay the actual price, or you watch me sell to the very people you've spent a decade trying to outmaneuver." Nobody spoke. The silence wasn't tense, it was terminal. Eventually, one board member, a quiet guy from legal, reached forward and pulled the licensing agreement toward himself. "We'll need to reconvene privately." I nodded. "Of course." I closed the portfolio, turned, and walked out. No threats, no raised voices, no theatrics, because power doesn't scream. It waits. And they knew, every single one, that I wasn't asking anymore. I was giving them one last chance. It took them 53 minutes. That's how long the board argued behind closed doors, trying to salvage dignity while their leverage bled out. I imagine Amara tried one last bluff, but even her confidence couldn't patch the hole she'd torn in their hull. The facts were carved in stone. I owned the engine. Everything else was smoke. When the doors opened, they didn't call me back. A junior associate, nervous, eyes avoiding mine, handed me a signed licensing agreement. Ink still wet, all pages initialed, attached a wire confirmation for $5 million, same-day transfer. I stared at it. Not in triumph, just a quiet exhale I'd been holding for 12 years. They'd built an empire on my mind, then tossed me like spare parts. Now they were paying rent just to keep the gears turning. Lyle didn't smile when I called, just said, "About time." I asked if he wanted hash browns or champagne. He said both. By sunset, the money was in my account. I checked. Once, watched the zeros line up, then turned off my phone, packed a bag, and drove north. The cabin was waiting. Cedar beams, stone fireplace, windows framing mountains like poured glass. No neighbors, no noise, just wind in the pines and water over rocks. I hadn't even furnished it. Didn't matter. Threw a camping chair on the deck, poured a drink, and sat barefoot as the light faded. That moment, that was the reward. Not the money, not the contract. This silence, this ownership, this freedom. No more stolen credit, no more hollow meetings, just me, my patents back under my name, and a company now paying for the right to exist. Amara kept her job, for now. But every product launch, every investor call, every earnings report from here on would carry a silent footnote, licensed from the man we fired. I don't need revenge. I am the reminder, the one who walked in with a portfolio and walked out with the keys. And as I leaned back, glass cool in my hand, stars blinking awake, I realized something. For 12 years, I'd been a component in someone else's machine, valuable, but expendable. Now, in the quiet dark, I wasn't a part of anything. I was the operation, and they'd be paying rent for the rest of their existence. Amara shredded a contract thinking she'd erased me. Instead, she triggered the clause that gave me everything. The patents, the power, the freedom to choose my own terms. Some chase titles, some chase corner offices. I chased something simpler, the right to own what I created. And now I do, not by luck, by preparation, by one buried clause no one bothered to read. They thought lawyers were paperwork. I knew they were insurance, written in blood. The drink tasted better than expected, the stars sharper, the silence earned. Tomorrow I'd review the offers, maybe take one, maybe build something new, maybe vanish a while and let them wonder. But tonight I was just Nicholas Crane, not an employee, not a contractor, not someone else's engine, just a man who built something real, got erased, and took it all back. Patent by patent, clause by clause, victory by quiet, calculated victory. You're the real architects of your own future. Thanks for watching.